us to fix, and they finally.
Well, thank you for staying on.
So you talk about the bridge.
Yes,
Jackson. Good.
finally.
You never mentioned anything about that. So on the sidewalk.
Well,
Okay.
There's tree growing and limbs are going out on the sidewalk as well.
I remember something
Okay. Coming down Jackson Street. Okay.
Down Jackson Street.
Okay.
That side. Now, I saw the MoDOT
Yeah,
there.
like, you know,
I asked them about it. I said, really?
You know which side?
All right, welcome everybody. I think it's just now 5:30. I'm not sure. We need to wait another moment for a couple of them to join us. Let's see. I'm not sure. Do we know if Aaron or Jack? And I'm not sure if we have anyone
I
online.
think Jack might be joining via
No.
WebEx.
Okay.
If he has a connection.
Okay. And Derek, okay. All right, well, I will go ahead and call the work session to order. Welcome, everyone. And we do have this online as well, and people can join virtually. The link is on the agenda. So item 2, Mrs. Donaldson, roll call, please.
Deacon, Fitzwater,
Here.
Hensley,
Present. Present.
Kimna,
Here.
Lester,
Here.
Schreiber, Spencer,
Here.
Spicer, Ward, here, Wiseman.
Item 3, parking garage discussions. So we'll welcome Mr. Britt Smith to go over option A through D on the agenda. Welcome, Britt.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I appreciate everybody's the opportunity for everybody to gather here tonight. Matt had included in the packet a memo, and I'm going to try to run this presentation pretty much right along with that memo. The memo itself actually follows the reports, and we have members from the consultant team here from SEA, Structural Engineering Associates, and I'm going to get the initials wrong. BNIM. I knew I would get them in the wrong order as well. So when we get to questions, when you start having, if you have any technical questions, I'm going to phone a friend and ask one of them to come up and answer your questions if I can't answer them myself. So to get started, as the council is aware, we began an evaluation of our parking garages, both of them. And the study's goals were to evaluate the condition of both the Jefferson Street parking deck as well as the Madison Street main garage. And the areas that we were looking at were structural, any structural issues associated with the garage, code compliance. Obviously, we've had these garages for a while and codes change, so we wanted an evaluation in reference to the codes. Looking at all the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems within both structures. And then finally, the parking control system, the entry gates, the pavement method, the general operations of the gates, of the garage. Then we asked them to go a little bit further and said, give us an idea of what is possible. Not that any one of those options is necessarily what we would end up with, but we wanted to say what was possible if we were to say, let's start over. And when we say we start over and talking about the Madison Street garage, one option is we start over within the existing footprint of the ground we own. And then another option is the potential to expand the footprint. What could those look like? And they've given us what I believe are some pretty good options to look at. As I said, none of those are necessarily what we would end up with, but they hopefully give us an idea of what is possible. The consultant team was made up, as I said, of Structural Engineering Associates as the prime consultant on the team. And joining their team was BNIM Architects handled the architectural side of this. Custom Engineering looked at the MEP, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. The Parking Whisperer is a company that looked at the parking revenue and the control systems. CFS Engineering is a civil engineering firm. Schindler Elevator looked at the elevator itself. And then To help us with cost estimation, we have Construction Management Resources, LLC. Obviously, this is a very comprehensive team and a lot of moving parts associated with this. Hence the reason we wanted to try to look at this is with a full council in a work session format. So tonight's discussion points, needed actions related to the Jefferson Street parking garage. We believe that that is, and we'll get into the details of that, the Jefferson Street is a little bit easier question, and if that was the only question we have, I don't think we would all be here tonight. We would handle that through a different format. But then we'd also like, staff would provide you with some feedback to either pursue rehabilitation or replacement of the Madison Street garage, and we're recommending opening a 30-day public comment period so the public can kind of weigh in on this to help you with the decisions that would be coming in the coming weeks and months. So again, I want to start with the easier one of the two for the discussion, and that's the Jefferson Street parking garage. We are recommending that we do a supplemental contract with SEA and move forward with some design work to get us some bid documents that would address some of the cracking, sealing of those cracks, membrane covering the upper deck, and some of the brick veneer panels that we have issues with. And more specifically, I'll talk about those each individually. First off, there is the deck itself, well, I want to back up just a little bit. As I understand it, when the deck was originally constructed in the 90s, cracks in the upper deck were pretty much immediate before the construction was even complete. At that time, a deduct was taken by that council as opposed to asking them to replace it. And so the cracks that you're seeing here, looking at it from the underside and on top, they're not new. They've been there since the structure was put in place. Some years ago, about 2009, I believe, we put the polyurethane deck on. We've had some issues with that decking, and as you can see, it's kind of peeling off. The purpose of that deck is to try to help seal those cracks and keep moisture from penetrating through it, shortening the life of the deck. It's time to replace that. It's actually past time to replace that. There's some other issues with some low spots that hold water. We tried to address that back in 2009 by building up this urethane to fill in those holes, and that didn't work, to be quite honest. It's been recommended that we add some additional scuppers, drains in those locations to address those, which is probably a much better solution than we attempted before. So we're recommending going and move forward and putting a new one of these polyurethane decks on associated with the Jefferson Street deck. Also, if you read the report, there is a recommendation in there that we have two of these brick veneer panels that are applied to the Jefferson Street deck, that something's going on. And this is a support underneath. It's basically, this is the wall. This part right here is the wall of the structure. And this metal angle is what those brick veneer panels set on. And in a few of them, we're seeing this crack. We're not exactly sure what is causing it yet. That's really beyond the scope of what we'd asked the consultant to look at it in the why, other than they've just shown us the what. So this needs to be addressed. And the concern would be that the panel might come off of the building and then impact the alley, and this faces the alley. So in the report had referenced temporary closing the alley. When I read that, knowing the value of that alley, we worked with the consultant for an alternate plan. And so as you looked at the draft report today, it still states that they recommend closure or temporary closure of commercial alley. But in working with them, we have installed these straps in those two panels that are giving us problems. And not shown in this particular picture, we've also come underneath it and added grout, making kind of almost a seat, if you will, filling in that area below. And with the consultant's approval, they believe that this is, at least equal to, from a safety standpoint, to closing the alley. And again, done it out of an abundance of caution until we can get a little bit further study. And so that is already in place. So if anybody reads the report, that's the reason that we haven't closed the alley, that we've handled it in another way. So with that, again, our recommendations that we move forward with a contract with SEA to provide whatever bid specifications we need to start addressing some of the issues that they've found. The estimated construction cost, including engineering, is about $400,000 as we move forward. And this would be paid for out of the parking fund within our fund balance. Do I have any questions in reference to Jefferson Street before we move on to the main garage?
Any questions, Councilwoman Ward?
Regarding this structure, is it built in a way that we can add decking to it?
Unfortunately, no. It's almost an urban legend that we hear often that it was designed with the idea of being expanded. Given a small footprint, if you tried to put in ramps, the ramps would eat up the entire space, and there would be no room left for parking.
Any other questions? Councilman Fitzwater?
How much is in that parking fund right now?
Right now, it's a little over $5 million, unrestricted fund balance.
I guess, how many spots, we have all the spots in there leased?
I'm sorry, when you say all the spots?
In the Jefferson Street deck, are all the spots, do we have annual contracts on those?
Yes, well, they're monthly monthly contracts, and yes, we actually have oversold that lot somewhere around 110 to 115%.
So do you know what the annual revenue is off of that lot?
Not off the top of my head, but I could get that information to you. But there's $70 a month spaces for the uncovered, and I believe $80 a month for covered. And as I said, I can't remember how many spaces are off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you said on the earlier slide that this is an item that you would like some action this evening from council on whether to do the repairs. The question that you ask, we would just likely just need a motion from council to move that forward. Is that what you were looking for this evening, to move this forward? This is separate from the Madison.
Right, this is separate from Madison's garage. If it pleases the council, we would come forward with a contract with SEA to do that design work after we've negotiated that scope and fee. Certainly, if the council wished to bless that with a motion, that would be handy for staff.
Would council like to do that before we move on? Because the majority of this is going to be on the Madison garage tonight. So while we're still talking about Jefferson garage, any motion from council this evening?
I have one more question.
Councilwoman Ward.
You had mentioned that the poly that you put on that upper deck was not successful. However, you mentioned that this would include putting poly back on it. Is it a different poly that's going to be?
Yes, that's a very good question. I'm sorry to cut you off. Because I had the same conversation with our consultants here. We believe that we had a less than average application when it was done previously, and we believe that the products are much better now than they were then.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councilman Spencer?
So as part of this study, do they have any recommendations of a maintenance schedule?
Yeah, once we place that deck, the decking on there, for that particular part, we would need to reseal it every 5 to 10 years, depending on the wear. And then, it also, the issues associated with the panels, we actually don't know what's causing it yet, so we don't really have a recommendation on what that looks like. But certainly regular inspections would be more than appropriate, given what they've found. And it's very hard to see. Like I said, if you look at that gap, it's pretty small. I had a hard time finding it when I first went up there. But kudos to our consultants for even finding it. The rest of it is, there's some issues with some of the smaller panels around the post and the decorative, to make them look more decorative. Similar issues with just corrosion at the bases, painting, et cetera. But this type of painting is beyond what probably we can do with our summer help with a wire brush. It's probably going to need to be sandblasted and blocked off areas, et cetera, and then the right paint.
I guess which leads to, how do we let the deterioration get so far away from us without having a good maintenance schedule, a good inspection process and procedure?
Well, I think I would take issue a little bit with how far away from it it's gotten. It's not really that we're just to the point where we're having issues. And we have been maintaining it, but we've been maintaining it with our summer help. Like I said, wire brushes, trying and keeping it repainted. But it's at the point now that it's, it's not even, the paint's not even lasting a year. We have to go a little bit further, and that's what we're actually talking about doing. If that's the only thing we were dealing with, I wouldn't be asking for a design contract. But the design contract's focus mainly would be with these structural panels and with that deck covering.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the Jefferson garage before we move on to Madison? And Jessica, could you go back to the slide with the 3 items for tonight? The one that says, okay, there it was, needed action. So tonight we'll have needed action related to the Jefferson Street garage, so that one we do need some council action. The other on Madison is just simply going to be feedback and then moving forward into the public comments. So really the only action tonight will be whether to move on from this. So does council want to take up the first bullet point now or at the end of conversation? Councilman Fitzwater?
Well, if we're going to deal with bullet point 1, I would recommend that we refer this back to the Public Works Committee. It seems like there's some things in this report, like environmental study, additional potential, says approximately $50,000 to provide staff with the necessary specifications. Kind of my thought was this was going to go through Public Works to sort out and bring back to council, so that I would recommend that we go through that process.
Would that be sufficient, Mr. Smith?
If that's the pleasure of the council, of course.
Because there's not a timeline issue.
No, we have stabilized the issue now. There's nothing that is pressing from a safety standpoint in any way.
Okay, so we have a recommendation from Councilman Fitzwater with the recommended action then related to Jefferson to go to the next Public Works meeting. Is there anything further that you need on Jefferson from council?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so then we will go on to the Madison.
And as I said, the Madison is probably the one that's a little bit more involved as we go through. And just off the bat, I'd like to clarify that staff is recommending that we pursue replacement of the Madison Street garage, and we'll explain that as we go through. But I wanted to put that recommendation up front. First off, a little bit of history. The garage contains about 615 parking spaces. You've often heard me say that it's 540. It's 540 leased spaces, and then we also have what we call Lot 2, which is part of the main garage, which we have some leased spaces in, but there's also meters in that, and that's the part that's across from Bones Restaurant in the alley. So when you combine those two together, it's about 615. The garage was constructed in multiple phases, and the first phase was done in 1961, and 3 levels of the west structure was constructed. And when we refer to the west structure in this picture, it's this grayer, more gray colored portion over here. And so the first 3 levels would have been, there's one below grade, and so, as you go up. Then in 1974, a 4th level was added to that west structure, and an elevator as well. And then in 1982, they began work on the east structure. So that's this portion here when we refer to the east structure. And the only way to move from level to level in the east structure is through the west structure. So in 1990, a 5th level was added to the west structure, and an elevator was extended, obviously, to that upper level. Also, within that time frame, a major renovation was done of the west structure, which it included replacing of some of the decking, and structural steel was looked at as well. So the consultant did quite a bit of, I'm going to call it down and dirty work. The first is chain dragging. This is a picture actually from our garage of one of their staff is doing a chain dragging. It seems like a pretty low-tech solution, but as you drag a chain across that concrete deck, the sound will change whenever there's a hollow spot within the concrete. It sounds kind of like, you know, witching wires for finding pipes, but there is an actual ASTM on how this is done. It's an industry standard that's been around probably as long as concrete's been around. Those delaminations or voids within the concrete generally are caused by moisture getting to the structural steel, causing it to corrode. And when it corrodes, steel that is rusted takes up more room than steel that's not. It expands. And that expansion is what causes those voids. So in those decks, at minimum, they found approximately 50,000 square feet of voided or, you know, concrete with voids in it, which has an estimated cost of about $5.1 million to replace. You know, Matt and I were talking about how we try to explain this. It's, if you go and walk that deck, there's no way that you will see it. It looks perfectly fine. But it kind of likened to termite damage in the wall. It's not seen until you pull the drywall off. In this case, it's not seen until we hire someone who's used to doing this work and can see the telltale signs and does the chain dragging. It's also of note that we did a previous report, 2009, I believe it was. And chain dragging was done at that time and very few voids were found. So this is something that has been accelerating over the past few years. This is an example of one of the floors in the areas that they found that had delaminations. And again, this is probably not the worst floor, but it is an example. The areas highlighted there in yellow would be the ones that at minimum would need to be replaced. And in talking with the consultants who we had a brief conversation before this, just kind of talking through this presentation and making sure that I wasn't going to say anything that didn't make sense to them. We talked about this. If we were moving forward today with this project, would we only do those areas that are highlighted in yellow? And I think after talking with them, I'm more convinced that we would do the whole floor. We wouldn't leave any. And I explain why in a little bit, but it has to do with the calcium intrusion into the slabs. If it's gotten here where it's rusting the steel, it's going to get to the other places as well. So I want to consider this kind of the floor, if you will, of the replacement. This is the minimum size that it would be, but I believe it would be our recommendation if we were to move forward that at least in this west structure that we would do all the floor as opposed to trying to save some of it. This would add construction time and it would add cost, but it would prevent us from having to put in that urethane layer on this new concrete if we were to take this option. So next, we actually have 4 stair towers within the structure, and we've closed one of them a few months ago due to section loss. Again, same cause, but this is a result of what could happen with those delaminations. You know, moisture gets into the steel, it pops, and the concrete degrades around it. The section loss is such that we have made a determination in one of those 3 stair towers that we just didn't believe that it was safe. And this is a picture from one of those for it to be continued to be used. So that one has been closed for the last few months. We have another stair tower that's not far behind this one, still usable, but if we have to close another stair tower, I think we would end up having to close the garage because we wouldn't have appropriate egress In fact, we're probably not in the best condition with egress as with the one closed. Estimated cost to repair those stairwells is about $200,000. The two that we have issues with currently.
Yes.
Is that recommendation going back with poured concrete for their stairwells?
If we were to pick that option, yes. I mean, we'd be poured concrete back.
We wouldn't want to go with a metal frame stairwell?
I think that would be a discussion I would have with our consultant, but I don't have an answer for you today, but that certainly is an option. But I would defer to folks that do this work a lot more than I do. I mentioned the calcium, the chloride. I said calcium before, I meant chloride. Chloride intrusion into the concrete. As part of this work, they did some forensic analysis. They took multiple test holes where they basically took concrete material out of a hole and tested to see what the chloride content was. And engineers can't have any presentation without a chart or graph, so this is my chart or graph. But what it's telling us is steel is typically embedded about 1.5 inches below the surface. And in this case, when we look at the test results at 1.5 inches level, the majority, if not almost all of them, we find calcium or chloride levels greater than what we would want to see at that level where the steel is. So that's the other reason that I would recommend replacing all those concrete, not just those sections, if we chose that option. And we'd have a structure that would last a lot longer in the long run, but it would cost more today. But if we take the option of just replacing sections and then putting the urethane level on, that's a cost of about $750,000. Again, I would consider that a floor, not a ceiling of the cost. It's a minimum, the minimum cost. Finally, there's some architectural issues associated with the garage, some that can be addressed, some that cannot. The biggest one is the one that meets right as you come in the garage. Our clearance in the garage is about 6'8". ADA code for van accessibility, I believe, is 7 foot minimum. Maybe it's even 7'4". But obviously, we can't raise that 6'8" because that's built into the structure. So that's something that cannot be fixed. The other things that are very difficult to fix is the traffic patterns, up and down movements, sight distance issues. Makes it very difficult to progress up and down levels and your conflicting traffic patterns. Those, again, cannot be addressed. There were some numerous areas that could be addressed. There's some ADA issues involving access to the elevator, some of our ramps at the lower level. Interestingly, Matt and I went and drove through the garage just this afternoon before this meeting, and a gentleman came in and parked in a wheelchair and began to try to navigate his way out of the garage. He obviously hadn't been in the garage before, and was a very physically fit man in the wheelchair, but he took about 3 different routes before he found the one that was appropriate for him to get out of the garage. So those issues could be addressed with a better signage, some better painting, and then there would be some structural changes too with the ramps, et cetera, but they are fixable. Those could be addressed. The garage was built with a different ADA code. Actually, there wasn't an ADA code whenever it was originally built, and it's been we've made some actions to try to make it better compliance, but the report has brought forward some other issues, not the least of which is our handrails, and some of our handrails are in pretty bad shape. Again, those could be fixed if we wanted to do it. There is a cost associated with it, but they are fixable. But when we got done, we'd still end up with these same architectural issues that the traffic pattern and the vertical clearance that could not be addressed. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. The systems in the garage are all very old. They are functioning, but they are well past their useful life. This is a picture of our emergency generator. It's in the basement. If you walk in that door, and I've done this a couple of times myself, you walk in this door, you need to duck quickly because this is about 4'8" to the bottom of this, and my head has made contact with it several times myself, and I'm not up there that often. So there's certainly a lot of issues that could be addressed. Estimated cost on that is about $400,000. Again, these are things that it's working now, but it may not be working tomorrow, and so that is in that overall cost. Finally, the parking control systems. Our gates are well past, and the technology is well left us behind. We've been talking with the supplier on upgrading that. Put that a little bit on hold as we were trying to figure this piece out. Didn't want to put money into upgrading the software and hardware, not knowing exactly where we're going to go with this. But estimated cost to bring that up to current standards would be about $200,000. Could possibly be done cheaper, but $200,000 I think is a good number to talk about. And then our elevator, Schindler elevator, looked at it, replacing the elevator or the cab, et cetera, about $125,000. As council may remember, we put about $60,000 into that not too long ago. Again, the elevator is currently functioning, it's working, but if we were going to try to make this garage right, we would need to put that kind of money into it to make the elevator last longer. And then one immediate action that is also referenced on page 30 of the report is there is one beam that for some reason has been hit, but it has exposed these post-tensioning cables that are at the base of it. This is the floor of level 4C, the floor of level 4C. It's only one beam. It's an extent is approximately 3 feet has been exposed. The repair to fix this particular point is not huge money, but getting the right people here to do it. We're talking somewhere, less than $20,000. But our consultant has done some structural calculations with what this does, and we're not able to accept it puts it in a condition where it cannot accept cars parked on it and a snow load at the same time. It overstresses this particular part of that deck. So as opposed to, what's recommended in the report was shoring this, which we could have done, but it would have been shoring at level 3C, level 2C, and level 1C. We had had to secure that all, have post on either side of it all the way down. In talking with the consultant, and given that our demand is not high right now, what we have done is just stopped using level 4C. You don't have to proceed through 4C to use the rest of the garage. It is in that newer part of the structure. So right at present, it's the highest level uncovered. We've asked our customers on that to move over into 4A and B, and we've blocked off 4C until we, again, decide what we're going to do with this particular item.
Councilman Spencer?
How many spots is that in 4C that we're losing?
I'm sorry, I should have looked that up, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'd say it's on the order of 50. It's on the order of 50. And with that, actually, I was happy to entertain questions in reference to the report. It's a lot of material, and we're trying to summarize into a few seconds what has taken our consultant to quite a while to compile into this report. And I would also say that I've had the opportunity to read a lot of engineering reports in my career, and I consider this to be one of the best ones that I've read.
Councilman Kimna?
Actually, yes. You know, with the exception of that one area that I just talked about, it's in really good shape. It's newer. It's half the life of the other garage. And whenever I move on, you know, we start talking about what is possible. Actually, let me just jump ahead a slide. When we first met with our consultant, we were talking about a scope of what we wanted to look at. We gave him 3 options. One was to remove and replace the western structure only and leave the eastern structure in place. That was the first bullet point. Can we just take down the old garage and put another garage right beside it, the oldest garage? In working through them, they just didn't believe that that was feasible. We would still be married to these different heights because that garage is tied in with our. It would certainly it could be done, but they did not recommend that we would pursue that route, and we agreed with that. And so we don't have an option for that particular bullet point.
Any other questions on the garage condition discussion before we move on to the next part? Councilman Fitzwater?
Maybe you could explain it. I wasn't a huge chemistry fan in high school, but a metal post in concrete, and I know they talked about it in their report. It appears like ours have rotted from the ground up. What's the process that would allow that?
Well, multiple process. The biggest cause is the chlorides. Chlorides, and we don't use chlorides within the garage, and very limited on the upper level. Most of it is what's drug in by cars. It comes in
Stairs also, though.
Yeah. Yes. Because they're all covered, and so we don't have to push. We don't have to shovel. We don't have to. It's, the chloride's just contamination, but it's also age. When there's a crack in it, just because it's chloride, that accelerates it, but moisture itself accelerates it as well. So any little crack, moisture begins to get down, and once it gets to steel, it'll start to rust. If there's moisture and oxygen present, rust will occur.
So is that happening from the outside in or from the inside out?
It's both. In the slabs, it's from the inside out, once moisture gets to the steel that's embedded in it. But if you're at a post that goes in to the concrete, which is it's not the best option to embed steel post into concrete because you have steel exposed to weather, so it's better to do a plate mounted on top and rely on the bolts. Or better yet, even on the side of the stairs. We also was pointed out when we were driving through the garage, control joints were placed over the top of the steel beams throughout the garage. And so those control joints are, a crack. It's a purposeful crack, but it's a crack. And it's right over the top of the steel beams. So the moisture goes down through that crack all the way to the steel. And if it's got chloride in it, the rusting is much faster, but still, even just moisture without chloride is going to rust.
Is there no process where a sleeve would go into the concrete and the post and the sleeve?
All is possible, but anytime you have steel and in concrete, when exposed to weather, you're going to run the risk that it's going to rust off at the concrete.
Thank you. Any other questions? And if not, we'll just have you keep moving.
Okay. And again, we talked about potential replacement options. I don't want to say that we're recommending any particular option because this is just a visioning idea. This is what it could be if we chose to do demolition and reconstruction. As I said, we asked the consultant to look at 3 possible scenarios. One would be to just remove the western structure and leave the eastern structure in place, remove both structures and replace within the same footprint, or look at remove the same footprint and maybe expand into a neighboring property. And so we've got three potential, what that could look like and some potential cost estimates in doing so. And again, I would emphasize the first option was after the consultants looked at it, they just couldn't seem to make a feasible way that they would recommend that we would move forward with, so that idea was abandoned. You'll notice this one's labeled, the first one is labeled option 2C. That's obviously, we had a lot of options to look at. Our BNIM gave us a lot of options, and we tried to narrow it down to three, just to give you an idea of what's possible, to represent what could happen. Not that any of the other options weren't good, it's just we thought these were the best ones that exemplified what is possible. In this option, it's a scissor-style ramp where, basically you're on a ramp almost the entire time, working your way up to the top. Again, 5 levels within the existing footprint. The green area here is potential retail space that could be added to the Capitol Avenue side. And then the blue is some parking offices and some parking storage. In this option, it's comparable in size to our existing garage, 5 levels like our existing garage. There's pros and cons to the scissor-style design. So, an alternative to this was option 2E, which has speed ramps. In this option, those same 5 levels, comparable, same number of parking spaces. Again, still the retail on the Capitol Avenue side. The parking, offices and storage is still there. But this one, it's much faster to progress from ramp to ramp, to entry and exit. Similar in cost. This one, I believe, is a little bit higher than the scissor style. Excuse me. But again, to show us what's possible. And then the third option. Sure.
Why the need for the additional 30 square feet per stall on this one versus that 2C option?
I'm going to have to defer to, I want to phone a friend.
Yeah, the additional 30 square foot per car, yeah, when you have a speed ramp, it's a little less efficient per car. But you get the greater convenience of going up quicker to your floor, and you get a greater convenience of having flat floors for kind of a passive security aspect to a garage. So that's why we did multiple options. It's a trade-off between square foot per car, convenience, on the different options. Does that make sense? I want to make sure I'm...
It makes sense. It just seems like a lot of
Yeah.
floor space for flat versus a ramp.
I'm with you, especially, it's just such a small footprint for the garage. I'm doing KCI garage for now, for right now, and we have basically this condition. We don't take as much of a penalty because it's a much bigger garage per square foot per car, because you still have to have the ramp no matter what, the square footage for the ramp. I know it gets into math, but it's all about that ramp, that convenience ramp.
And they're both 90-degree in?
Both 90-degree stalls, exactly. I think we drew these at 9-foot wide stalls to be conservative for right now. So it meets today's modern geometry for a parking garage. So
Okay,
And
thank you.
And just to expand on that, I kind of point out here, you can see we got this progression here, and then there's one at the end of here. Those are penalties, and then of course the ramp themselves are penalties that you're not getting parking spaces on. So I think that's a little bit of where that loss is.
And one reason we said, well, include something like that so we all look at it, because one of the comments we hear, it takes so long to get up and down in the garage. And so this would overcome that issue on our same footprint, so you could cycle up quicker, so it may be a little more desirable to use because of that, but we lose the efficiency. So we just want to have a comparison.
Councilman Kemna?
Yeah, and this could also go to
Is your mic on?
I'm sorry. So as we're considering options for new parking garages, I'm seeing that there's various options. Some of them that you may have said, okay, we're going to rule this out initially. I'm just curious, as you're doing your study, what parking garages have you looked at that are currently in operations, maybe throughout cities and stuff like that, that you've said, hey, these elements work? Well, I mean, what were some of the comparisons that you guys used?
If I could try to, we didn't rule anything out. We tried to narrow it down to give you just some ideas of what could happen. If we decide to move forward with this, we would revisit a lot of these different options. We wouldn't be locked into any particular one of the drawings I'm showing you today. We're just trying to show them as possibilities.
Sure, okay.
Just as possibilities. And there's a lot of different garage styles, and there's pros and cons to them all. The flat obviously makes it easier for it's a light and to get security cameras, whereas on a ramp, it's more difficult. So there would be a lot of discussions that we would have to have going forward with that design process as we work through all those. And many of them I probably don't know about today, but the gentleman back here and the team that we would put together would.
And maybe Craig or even you, I know early on, we talked about when we first started the contract, the space matters. And so I think Craig picked up, or Ralph, one of the two, real quickly, that we kind of had an unusual width, and that made the having the retail more available to this size spot. Is that how to explain that, Craig? Just because once you have a certain circulation, then you got to repeat it. So if you have extra space, what do you do with it?
Right. I think what we're talking about is the width from the alley to Capitol Avenue. We end up with some leftover real estate that we could actually set this building back a little bit further from Capitol Avenue. And you could do, we could do, one option would be angle parking on Capitol Avenue, which I don't think I would be super crazy about. But the other option is you could have more of an open walkway, maybe for some outdoor seating, and I'll show you a picture of what that could potentially look like. Is that where you're going for, Matt?
Yeah, just size matters, whether it's this way or that way. And that's why we also want to try to see what that looks like.
Right. And this was the one that really jumped out at me for a lot of different reasons. If we were to expand into the neighboring parking lot, just as an example, not that this is set in stone or anything like that, we would end up with a 3-level garage, and we'd have more spaces than those 5-level garage was. And one of the big complaints we have from the 5th floor to the basement, it doesn't sound like much, but by the time you get to the exit, you feel like you've already driven home. So this 3-level makes a lot of sense. A lot more retail space, potentially retail office space could be made on Capitol Avenue. The garage itself is actually, this particular configuration we can get to looking at cost estimates, was the cheapest of the three options that we put in front of you. And again, not saying that this is the right one, the right layout, the exact right design. Just again, this is what's possible. So just to give you an idea. And then to kind of give you an example of what these were, we believe these are fairly conservative cost estimates. And the numbers could be much lower, but right now is the worst time in my career to try to estimate what construction costs are. So I think I think the consultant was trying to be certainly on the conservative. We all get tired of being low. So, but you can see that option 3A is 713 spaces and has the lowest cost per space, about 54. And that number of cost per space could be much less depending on what options we choose. Obviously, they're adding the retail space, that square footage that we're buying, but we're not offsetting it with parking. So if you didn't do the retail space, you could either have a whole lot more spaces, and that per stall cost would come down significantly. We have a lot of contingencies in here as well. So that number is in the $54,000 per stall. That could come down into the 30,000 per stall as we would move forward with the project. But we have to get some we'd have to start nailing down some details and to start bringing that down. So in the previous example, the Madison Street rehabilitation was estimated to be about $12 million. I would consider that the floor of what that cost would be. That would be the minimum. And in this situation, I would hope we would call this the ceiling of what potentially it could be to replace the garage.
Councilman Spencer?
Probably another option that I would like to get some information on is, I see this as a city utility. Have we given any thought of getting out of the parking business and selling our assets and letting the private industry take it on and let them do what they do best, and that is to turn a profit, and we don't have to be the bad guys of being uptown and always having to hand out tickets?
Well, somebody would have to be the bad guy, but has it been looked at? I'm not aware that anybody has done any study in that. I know that I have not. I don't.
No, I mean, that wasn't, I guess that's a completely different discussion, but now you know the cost, you could look at that, I suppose.
How would one kind of start maybe investigating that option?
I'd have to give it some thought, of course.
To be honest, I have no idea.
You mean
Council-
selling the entire utility?
Yes.
I mean, the city of Chicago did that. They sold it for something like $5 billion.
I don't think ours is worth that much.
It's not worth that much, but the idea is essentially you deputize a private company to write tickets. So it's not us writing tickets, but they're writing tickets on the behalf of the city of Chicago. I don't know if we will ever get out of the business of actually being the people that are responsible for the tickets. So if enforcement is the problem, I don't know if that is a solvable problem. Certainly the management is something that cities have done in the past. How you price that, I don't know. That would probably take quite a bit of thought and research on. Probably have to hire a consultant.
And I bring up one issue that we do on all of our utilities. We get spin-off benefit, such as in the parking group, just talking about them. They also not only maintain our spaces in garages and lots, but they maintain city hall sidewalks by, brooming off snow if we get it. Downtown sidewalks, they get a fee from the downtown to clean that up and keep those looking a little better. We have a little better control by working with those folks so we don't beat things up too bad and try not to. We do other things with them as well, similar to, we have extra personnel to utilize in other aspects, so you get those spin-offs too.
Well, and it seems like, too, that the parking fund is healthy and has accumulated based on the management that council direction has given to staff and, looking forward to potential increases, keeping up with the times that, there hasn't been an increase in a while, but now that this may be on the table. So that's also, I think, an option under city management. And then also when we looked at the potential garage on Jefferson Street, a new additional garage, that I thought the consultant said at that time that having it all under the city's umbrella made the most sense, because we did look at the potential of having that privately done as well. But at the time it was looked at that having the city manage all of that made the most financial sense too.
Well, and I could see the complexities of having a private ownership of just one parking garage versus the whole market. And I think that would be the advantage of looking at it from a whole market perspective of having a private company either obtain the assets or that's what I would envision, is them just buying the assets and we get out of the maintenance and building of parking garages. I think, yes, we have $5 million in our parking fund, but that's a drop in the bucket of what this Madison Street parking garage is going to cost. So I don't know what the funding stream is. I mean, that hasn't been proposed yet either. So, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns how that would even be paid for. So.
Yeah, obviously there'd be a lot to figure out. And what we as staff would like is to try start narrowing the funnel as to what we're looking at so that we can target in and start answering those questions. You know, financing obviously is a huge part of this, and rates are a huge, part of how you deal with that. I mean, operations, whether you had a private company come in and do it or it was done by the city, certainly there's pros and cons to each. One argument is private company has to have profit that they have to put in their pocket, or they're obviously not going to be in business for very long. And could those profits be reinvested back into the citizens? That's a philosophical, certainly, discussion that I don't know that staff's ready to take on, but certainly, again, I think it would take a consultant to kind of look at that, figure out what that could look like.
Looking at newer garages, kind of on this next slide, I know that you mentioned you were going to talk a little bit about that potential on Capitol Avenue and a lot of new garages being built. This is what they're doing is adding potential retail type space. So do you want to touch on?
Right,
on
and
that?
that's this is an
Or Councilman
architectural.
Lester?
So before you move on, in your last cost slide, are those updated figures? Because I noticed for 3A, it's different from what's in the report.
Well,
The-
it shouldn't be, because
So-
I copied this directly. That's actually an image from the PDF of the report.
I'm looking at my PDF.
What page?
Oh, what page is it? I don't know. It's the one that gives the.
Well, there's two different
options.
places where they talk about
Okay.
I'm looking. Oh, I'm
It's
looking.
giving
over.
the different options. And anyway, it.
That's page 5.
This is. I don't know what page it is. I don't see what page.
Yeah, this one. That is what is on the screen is from page 5.
Okay, this is toward the end of the report.
Well, if toward the end of the report, that's from the consultant that was doing the actual cost estimation,
Okay.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And
So
I'd have to look into it
Yeah.
with you.
you can have it. See what's on the back. Yeah. It looks a lot better in that page.
I think that doesn't have all the information. I mean, I don't think that it includes all the cost associated with it.
3A is the only one different on that, so I don't know why.
We'll look into that, Mike, and get back with you. But to answer the mayor's question, this is an architectural rendering of what possibly it could look like on Capitol Avenue. As you can see, you've got the 3 levels above, the lower level being a retail space, increasing the distance between the curb and the building face, providing for some outdoor seating, if it was restaurants, et cetera. Not saying this is exactly what it would look like. This was done just to give you an idea of what might be possible. And it is a significant amount of street frontage that would be available for potential development.
Makes sense being in the downtown area, close to the Capitol, a lot of demand for that kind of space, and it also enhances the sidewalk area around it.
And obviously, parking wouldn't be a problem because you would have parking in the structure itself.
Right. Councilman Kimna?
Yeah. I know on option 3, it was suggested that you could extend it. There's a property next to it. I know we're still in the discussions, but has there been any conversations with that property owner on the potential?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, we notified them that, this is a potential, is going to come up because it was obviously, just kind of glaring us in the face. And they were thankful they knew about it, and more to come on that. If that, so really, we were just kind of looking, kind of seeing, on both of these, we feel like more or less the Jefferson deck is pretty straightforward. We just repair it and move forward. And then this one, though, there is that option of repair in place, and we didn't know the temperature of what people would be thinking once they read these. And so, and again, we suggesting that public comment period is something, this is a big item, pretty important, obviously, for the community. And so we wanted to give a little extra time, so we don't have to, there's no decision made, but it'd be interesting to know, just after reading the report, your first thoughts at least, so that as we go through like a public comment period, what are people weighing in on mostly, or maybe both. And so we're just trying to, show these options and kind of talk about them here in this format so everybody hears it. And, we anticipate probably our schedule would be, if you want us to do the comment period, we think it's a good idea. Next 30 days or so, we know the holidays are coming. We would take that and either pop back up at a Public Works and Planning Committee meeting with that summarized and back to you, or we could do another work session or a council meeting, whatever everybody prefers to do. So we're kind of looking a little feedback there as well. But if we could be able to say yes, to us, it's kind of throwing good money after bad on these old structures. I think our consultant one time made a comment to me that there aren't very many steel frame structures, parking structures around anymore. They've all been taken down at this point. You'll find, he knows of some. The man in yellow shirt kind of is more in the business of repairing parking structures in many cases. So that's why we brought him in to look at that part of it. But there just aren't that many around anymore. They've all been taken down. Interestingly enough, this is was built about the same time as the High Street Viaduct. More or less in that same time frame. So, again, it's at the end of its useful life. We either have to do a really major rehab of it, is what we're trying to say. Probably that's the floor, as Britt pointed out. We'd really want to do a better job of it than even in this report, and put that thing back into a service life of another 40 years or so. Or is that better spent, and you'd still have code issues and various things going on and maintenance of just like old buildings, or go ahead and look at really investing in something new, potentially expanded. None of that has to be decided, the look of that or the expansion part either, but it seems like that's why we went ahead and said, hey, we want to just recommend, after reading through this thoroughly, talking to our consultants through the process, it seems prudent that we go ahead and look at really honing down on a replacement option. Of course, there's, like Britt said, a lot of things that come, financing, all of that. As you can see from the age of what we have, it was constructed over many phases and periods. There's probably some of that in our future discussions. I think our rates have room to move, but maybe how much, that'll have to be a financial study either way to figure out how we want to fund this. And so there's all of that yet to come, but we kind of got to narrow that down so we can get focused and have our folks efficiently look at that. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, I guess. So any feedback would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Marash. And Councilman Kemna, I have spoken with the property owner just at a very high-level, basic conversation about this, and also mentioned the work session this evening. So if council moves the direction for a replacement in that expanded footprint, then we will certainly make sure that we include them in further discussions as well.
I just didn't know the communication piece.
Yes, so there has been some basic high-level communication. Councilwoman Wiseman and then Councilman Spencer.
Yes, so we've had a lot of discussions about parking around downtown and lack thereof, or the perception of the lack thereof, either way. Why are you against the diagonal parking as opposed to shops up there? I guess I should say not against, but why is that not your favorite?
The diagonal parking sounds like it adds a lot of parking, but when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, it really doesn't add very many spaces, and it adds a lot of conflict as people back out into traffic. So I think it would increase accidents and only marginally increase the number of spaces.
Thank you. Councilman Spencer?
Yeah, being that it took a while to get this report, and I'm just definitely not ready to give any kind of sense of honing in or direction tonight. I think Public Works, as Councilman Fitzwater, chairman of that committee, stated very well that it probably needs to go back to that committee. But I think we're kind of doing things a little bit out of order here. I think we should get public input even before we hone in on a process or a direction. I mean, it's kind of disingenuous to ask for public comment but we've already made a decision. Hey, we're going to replace the parking garage. What do you want to say about that?
Mm-hmm.
So I would take this opportunity to get an opportunity for the public to voice their support, concerns, questions, whatever they may have.
And I think from a staff level, we don't disagree with that idea, but we wanted to, I wouldn't say gauge your opinion, but get your questions so that we can be prepared for the public, because they're going to have similar questions. And but alternatively, we'd like input as to what that format looks like when we bring that public comment back. Do we bring it back to this format in a work session, or does it go to Public Works and Planning? Staff can support either option, but would like the pleasure of the council on that particular item.
And again, I would really like some information on what it would look like to, like I say, get out of the parking structures and parking business. So I think that's an option that is quite viable at this point, especially with the investments that we're considering making with either a new or a full rehab replacement of Madison.
So
Councilman Lester?
what entities lease parking now, and how many spaces do each of them lease? And I'm assuming they all know about this discussion going on, but I'd like to know
Who are our customers? It's
Right.
just about everyone who lives or works within the downtown area. We have quite a bit of parking to the state agencies, various state agencies, including the Public Service Commission, which has offices across the street. But then we have also a lot from the local businesses and law offices, et cetera, within the downtown area. Central Bank obviously is another customer. So basically, if somebody is downtown, one way or another, we're probably either supporting their customers or we're supporting their employees.
And as I recall, you said most of the slots are leased already.
We have room for more, but and I didn't look at the numbers lately. It varies. People come in and take monthly and then not. But generally speaking, it's around 400 of our customers are lease, and the rest of the space, I'm talking about in the 540 cars. About 400 of those are lease customers, and the rest are for transients, as we call them, people that are coming in and paying hourly.
Any other
Do we have any idea about potential growth of that demand or not?
Again, if I had a crystal ball, I would refer to pre-COVID and post-COVID. Pre-COVID, during session, we were full every day in the garage. I'd say every day from late February, April, through the end of session, which is beginning of May, especially during the lunch hour. That was our busiest time. Post-COVID, we haven't gotten to that full level yet. Will we get back to that? I can't say for sure that we will, but I have to believe that we will. That's just, I wish I had science that I could point to it. As an engineer, we like facts that I could point to, but I can't believe that many people left and don't have businesses within, business to conduct. I know that there is a lot of virtual business going on, but I believe that the demand will return.
And for future growth, to that point, there are some properties in the downtown that have been left undeveloped because of specifically parking. For example, the 210 East High, around that one, whatever the Penny's building. You can certainly talk with those property owners. They've had a challenge specifically with parking. And then there was businesses that have left downtown that have cited, parking not just for customers, but staff and other things like that as well. And then the upper floors that have been yet to be developed. So there's like that, when you ask for potential for growth, those are some potential for growth that have been untapped because of that. And we have a program for parking for people who do develop their upper stories, but it's not on High Street. And there are not, we don't have the proximity for some of those people to actually invest in some of those properties. So you just asked about potential, so wanted to touch on that. Mr. Marash?
Yeah, and not to put anybody on the spot, but I know, when we had a contract with Central Bank to buy one of their lots, they actually asked us for a guaranteed another, I want to say 150
I believe it was
spaces
150. I had to go
in
back to my
addition
notes to make
what
sure.
they already had. And I don't know if that's current demand growth or whatever they were experiencing at the time, but they wanted the ability to make sure they reserved that in the contract with us, and they were paying market rate with that reservation and everything. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
Would it be worth, could you put the slide back up with the cost, the chart for the three options? So we have 2C is stay within the current footprint to repair. Option 2E is tear down and rebuild within the current footprint. And then option 3A is tear down and rebuild within an expanded footprint.
Right. Yeah. 2A and 2E are within the existing footprint. 3A is the expanded footprint.
Okay. And I know it might be nice to almost put, rebuild, expanded, or I don't know, just since we're talking about that. And I think what was mentioned tonight too, in getting public input is important, but when you look at those numbers, the estimated cost to keep it where it is and repair, for us to even think about paying more than the total construction cost for brand new, plus more spots, plus the other benefits of access, not so many stories, you have less of a height, you have the potential of adding the retail piece, and a big glaring aspect of it is ADA. So there's so many things that we can't overcome with the first option of 2C.
Yeah, actually, ma'am, the 2C is a rebuild as well. I do not have the option for reconstruction on this particular slide.
Okay, so you were talking about,
Rehabilitation is about 12 million. These three are all brand new garages. The first two are within the existing footprint. The third one is an expanded footprint.
okay, all right. Even I'm getting confused looking at these without what they are.
Right.
The 2C, 2E, 3A.
Right. I was trying to take straight from the report. I wanted to make sure I'm, using the consultant's information.
So all three are including ADA upgrades that we will not deal with that issue.
Right.
Because I just thought when we bring it to the public, that's going to be a difficult one to say we would even consider.
Yeah, the rehabilitate, actually, I guess I did not put the final number on a slide in the rehabilitation, but it's approximately $12 million to rehabilitate the garage as it exists today. That's about 12 million. Again, consider that the floor, because we didn't look at, the study did not include lead paint abatement, whether or not there is lead paint there. I suspect that there is, but I have no proof of that. And asbestos, and then again, as I talked about, when you're replacing this much floor in that older garage, does it make sense to leave those other pieces there, or just take the whole floor? So 12 million is a floor. It probably, if we would move forward with that option, it would be much higher, most likely. And then to tear it down and start over, you're in the higher numbers, which is what this final slide is.
Okay.
But again, we think this is a fairly conservative numbers, and that the actual cost could be brought down.
Councilman Hensley?
Thank you. Britt, you showed images of the different styles of garages. And I don't know exactly. I don't know if any or all of these are sort of transferable to different size footprints. But has there been any thought given to scraping the Jefferson Street garage and building new with a style that would be conducive to more than 2 floors of a parking garage in a prime location?
We conducted a study internally with that back in '05, I believe it was, and could not come up, the size configuration, by the time you do the ramps, you'd end up with a 4 or 5, 6-level garage, and it'd have very few spaces in it by comparison. It's just the size isn't, and then when we actually did the study, most recently, we were looking at various different options for a new location. That one was, our consultants looked at it and threw out almost immediately. It's just, the size constraint is just not conducive for what we would need.
So the ramp issue exists not just if we tried to add it to the current garage, but even if we started all over?
Right.
Wow, okay, thanks.
Yeah, and just to clarify that, so when we were looking, when we were talking about those other lots, we were really trying to focus in, and I can't remember the dimension. Was it 400 by, 400 feet kind of gives you a.
We have the guys that are experts on that right here.
We had that 400 feet square, I think it was, or some dimension where you could park off both sides of the aisle and circulate up, and that was kind of the minimum dimension.
You need about almost 300 feet to park on the drive lane as a ramp. So, and to be efficient about it. So you need 300 by, in this case, let's see, this is 180. So for 3 bays, for a 3-bay garage. So that's what you kind of need as a footprint. And the Jefferson City, I mean, it is what it is. It's just a 1-level garage because you can't make the ramps work. The other thing is when we're talking about efficiency, because the existing site's so short, right? We're ramping both sides, and that's not as efficient as well. So it really is about the size of the lot, I think, to your point. And the full lot is really a generous lot to put a garage on, and that's why it's so much more efficient. So hopefully that answers questions.
And looking, as we wrap up discussion, looking forward to getting public input, and you mentioned wanting some direction and feedback from council on whether it's another work session, you said, but as far as gathering input, would we have an email for the public to send comments and a place where they could come and see message boards with information, or a link on the city's website to these studies? What kind of ways can we gather?
I talk with our planning staff, who's much better doing public comment than certainly I am. And what we envision to doing is putting our studies, out there on our website, links to them from the website, and an email for comments, maybe some prompted questions of, to help them understand what the comments we're looking for. Not, that looks ugly, but, what can we do to be better? What do you think is the right thing to do? We would do that on our city website, and trying to get the word out through the various social media sites, and then Downtown Association obviously would be another avenue to get the word out to the public, and then obviously our normal press. We can do press releases, et cetera. If it was the pleasure of the council, we could also do a public, more of a public meeting where people could come in. Really, I mean, I can put some of this information on a board, but the details are in the words, and it's hard to put those words in a picture. So, the reports themselves, I think, are good, and they're still, like I said, they're still draft. But the only reason they're still draft, in my mind, is the couple issues that we took. They had some suggestions, and we did a different option. And I'd like the report to reflect the option that we took as opposed to the one that they suggested.
So when you say then you'll give about 4 weeks for public comment, just trying to hone in on kind of finalizing what you need from us tonight so that you can move forward, get a press release out, get this information out.
What I'd anticipate is that the public comment period would start, in the near future, within the next week or so. But Thanksgiving, we'd have to kind of take a look at that. The long and short of it is, it would probably be the January timeframe before we would have something. I mean, I just don't think it's fair to ask the public in the middle of Thanksgiving or in the middle of Christmas to give us comments. So we'd want to make sure that when we say 4 weeks, they give them 4 weeks that aren't holidays. Given 4 weeks from today would be in the middle of Christmas, right at Christmas time. So I would think in the middle of January would probably be the most appropriate time to bring it back to the council in whatever form you want that, whether it be at the Public Works and Planning Committee or, again, in a special work session.
So would council like to think about a work session in January to get that feedback? So that the full council, Councilman Fitzwater?
I guess I'm puzzled. We've got a process in place. We've got a committee that is responsible for this. You have 5 members of us here. The Public Works Committee, we've got a lot of work to do, not only to decide if we're going to tear down or rebuild. What does that look like? What's the financing going to be? What's that going to cost? How long are we going to be down? Are we going to use the broad footprint, small footprint? Are we going to create development opportunities while we do it? Are we going to build 1 garage or 2 garages? How long are we going to be down? What are we going to do with our current customers while we are down? Seems like there's a lot of footwork that needs to be done. We happen to have a committee that is responsible to do that. I just don't know why we're sidetracking that process. I mean, I think all 5 of us voted for the study back last December. It was a 6-month process, and I get it, there's delays. I'm not ragging on that, but we started asking in June, where's the report, where's the report, where's the report? We want to get on top of this. We are committed to this process. I don't know why we're going around that process to get to an end product. Anybody that wants to attend those meetings is more than welcome to attend those meetings.
So I'm hearing you say put it on the January Public Works. Should we do it that way? Or maybe December and January, that both could have some parking garage discussion?
It's on every Public Works where we have opportunity to discuss. And again, the report took longer than what was anticipated. That's not my point. The fact that we have it now is it's going to be fast-tracked as much as we can fast-track, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we can sit at this table, in my opinion, at least my vote, to say this is where we go. I think public input is critically important, but we still have a lot of facts before. I don't know how the public makes a decision if we can't tell them what it's going to cost. Now, I look at option 2C. I don't know, it was up there a while ago. It's $60,000 per parking spot. I have 11 spots in that garage at $840 per spot. Dividing 840 into 60,000, 627, I think it is, takes 72 years to pay for that spot. That doesn't include financing, people, any other. I think we've got a lot of work to do to squeeze numbers, and that's why the Public Works Committee is there, I thought. And I would recommend we send it back with a recommendation that do your due diligence. Our staff has done an amazing job of getting us to this point, and when we're ready with the product, we'll come back to this committee with public input at the appropriate time.
And I think that's exactly what staff is asking us, so nobody has said to try to fast track or change that process, so hearing that is fine. I think this evening, knowing the complexity of spending an hour and a half just on the one topic and being able to share it with everyone, and having the consultants here, thank you for coming tonight, so that we could be able to share that directly with you. So certainly that's a great option. I think that's what you're asking for, Mr. Smith, is how council would like to proceed. So I do hear that option. So do you have your direction that you need?
We're good.
Good. And then also lastly, you might want to, when you do put the questions out to the public, maybe you could put something at the parking garage itself, a QR code where they pay their tickets, or when they walk in, a little sign that says, do you know this survey or questionnaires open? Please give us your input, and here's how to access it so we can get to our users too, perhaps?
We will certainly take that into consideration. I think that's doable.
Great. Any other questions of council, comments, questions?
I wonder if the consultants have anything they want to add.
We can invite you to the podium if you would both like to. Sure, and then if council has questions to you, and just speak into the mic so the people online can hear, and we'd love to have both of you come up and give us some input as well. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Sorry the report was late. But we did want to do a good, thorough job for you, and I think we accomplished that. Hopefully, we've provided the information you all need from us to make a knowledgeable decision. That was our goal, and I think we've hit that goal. But I did want to thank everyone here for allowing us to assist you on this project and assist you however you choose to move forward. It's the parking structure you have is a unique structure in its geometry and its construction type. Even the east structure is somewhat unique in that you have steel columns and a concrete floor frame. But as Britt mentioned, the east structure is a much better shape. If the whole garage had been in that shape, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But you know, we were here to learn too and see what comments you had. We will look back at that discrepancy in the cost estimate. I would like to say about the cost estimate, to reiterate what Britt said, the cost for repair probably should be seen as a bottom cost. We did not include an escalation to midpoint on that, which is basically inflation, whereas the new construction did. And the cost for the new construction is probably, as Britt said, again, an upper limit. We included a lot of things in there to give the city a lot of choices and flexibility in what you did. So as we see some of this cost per stall, I think we can probably come in well below that. But we wanted to make sure you have enough money allocated to achieve all your goals for this garage. So be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any, Councilman Fitzwater?
I appreciate your comments. The comment that I park in the east garage most of the time. If I get there late, I end up having to go down the basement side. But the comment that it would be hard to tear down the west side and keep the east side and make it contiguous to build something beside it, are you in agreement that that would be a very difficult process, or do you think there's a way to do that? Because it's, the east garage is so disjointed itself. I mean, with the west garage, it works, but
I think you have a lot of limitations, and I'll let Mr. Scranton comment on that as well. Craig and his company are experts in new garage construction. But the east structure, which is the better of the two structures, was constructed to match the west structure. And the west structure has some real limitations on head height, just the geometry of the garage, the footprint of the garage. It's very, very restrictive. So the overall plan, if you looked at some of the options, the I think it's 2C and 2E, they're not very efficient, and it has to do with the footprint of the garage and the geometry to get the vertical circulation. You have to get cars from the bottom to the top. And on that smaller footprint, to get the same car stall count, you have to go taller. And by going taller, it becomes less and less efficient because you're using more vertical movement in the garage. And so if you look at taking just the east structure and leaving it, now your geometry is even smaller. And so that vertical transition becomes more and more difficult. And I'll let Craig respond to this, but it just came to a point where it didn't make sense to try and squeeze a garage with 5 floors of vertical transition into such a small square footage.
And if I could just expand on that a little bit, what we charged them with is don't think within the box. You know, what if we expand on to the east and open up the other, you know, where the east garage is, or excuse me, the west garage is now, you know, open that up for development in some other way. You know, can either side, you know, you pick it. And they just couldn't come up with something that they felt comfortable with.
I would just add, Ralph did a great job. The east side, actually, it's got some bizarre sloping to that floor plate as well. So it really makes it difficult to connect new additions to it. Ralph explained it perfectly. It was so small, the only thing you could do is almost put back what you have, which I'm gonna tell you what you have is a split tier system, and it's, today, we would not build a garage like that today, with those geometries. Let's just put it that way. That was very difficult. So we did just abandon that. The only other thing I wanted to say was, there was a comment about ADA accessibility, et cetera. Just to clarify a few things, 7 foot is the minimum clear for any handicap parking. 8 foot 2 is clear for handicap van. So not only do we not really have the 7 foot in general, but we have other issues as well there in the garage. And then there was also a question about steel stairs, and I will simply say today, and the whole issue with the garage really is that it's a steel frame with steel pan garage, and today we do not build garages like that. We also do not build steel stairs because they all rust out very quickly in a garage. So it's concrete all the way pretty much today. So we've pretty much torn out any steel stair we've ever did 40 years ago. So that's one of the main issues with this building is just the construction type. And it's just going to continue to eat away, would be my thought. So.
Thank you for the feedback. We appreciate you all being here this evening to give us the report feedback in person. Mr. Molman.
Yeah, and not to beat a dead horse, but if the answer is in order to keep the east garage and rebuild the west garage essentially to match, I don't believe ADA would even allow that. You can't build a new structure with built-in ADA problems. You can rehab old ones and have a plan to remediate in the future, but you cannot build a new structure that is not in compliance with EDA. And so I don't even think it's a legal possibility to do that without running afoul of the federal law.
Thank you, Mr. Molman. Any other questions for our consultants or comments before we wrap up the meeting? Also, thank you, Councilman Deacon, for joining us virtually. Anything else or motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Have a great evening.